Good morning, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are YouTube. So the other day, Triumph made an announcement that they are tying up with an Indian company called Bajaj to produce a small single-cylinder bike. It's going to be producing quite large numbers, primarily for the Indian market. This is nothing unusual in itself. I mean, KTM, for example, have had are part owners of Bajaj and have had tie-ups, and numerous companies have had tie-ups with Indian companies in the past. But where this is more significant is that India is very much an emerging market for motorcycles, and it's really one that all the big manufacturers have been looking to. Obviously Harley Davidson built the street and street rod there for mainly economical reasons, but also because if you want to sell bikes in India, unless they're actually built there, there's huge import levies on them, and as a result you don't really sell imported bikes there in any serious numbers, because although it's a country that is experiencing big financial growth, it's still quite a poor country for a lot of people. But the average Indian is becoming more socially mobile and is now interested in things like buying motorcycles. So you've got two choices. You either set up your own factory there, as Harley Davidson had done. They did it further back than you think, and they've even built some of the big bikes there for the Indian market. Or you tie up with one of the Indian manufacturers like Bajaj. And Triumph have gone the Bajaj route. And it made me think about this sort of thing. Is this good or bad for manufacturers? Because you think, well, you know, it's taking jobs away from the parent company and from the original area, which is true to a degree. I mean, every Triumph bike built in India isn't being built in Britain. And I remember when Triumph had their original tie-up in Thailand, when they originally put the first product or first factory in Thailand, and people were up in arms initially, said, oh, it won't be Triumph anymore. And people soon forget that, and soon forget about that. And thank you. But it's a bit different to that, because this isn't a Triumph factory in India. This is an Indian company that are simply being told, this is what we want you to build, go ahead and build it. Well, in the grand scheme of things, you've got two options, because Bajaj are a huge company, and they're actually the 6th largest motor manufacturer or motorcycle manufacturer in the world. And that means when you consider that half of all manufacturers of motorcycles in the world are in China, they're pretty much the largest one outside of China. So you can take every brand you know, Bajaj produce far more bikes than any of them, so it's not like they're inexperienced. And obviously they'll have been through a very strict vetting process before they're allowed to put the Triumph name on the tank of anything. And this gives Triumph more brand prestige in India, which if you've got an emerging market, that's a good thing. And it also enables Triumph to produce more vehicles without actually having to pay for the facilities to do so. And it's tempting, because BMW are doing this as well now. They've got their G310, which is their new 300cc bike, and that is also being built in India. KTM build the smaller Dukes in India, not just for the Indian market, but for export as well. And what happens, of course, is you've got two choices. The whole idea of we'll build them at home, we'll make every Triumph British, and we'll conquer the world. That world doesn't exist anymore. It simply isn't there. If you try and do that, your Triumph bikes sold in other parts of the world are too expensive. You try and build your Indian market bikes outside of India, you just won't sell them at all. Your brand doesn't grow, and your production all over the world suffers as a result. We are living in a global economy now and have to build things all over the world. The whole idea of homegrown is simply naive. So yeah, it was the case that these bikes, so like the Harley I rode the other week, are actually built to a really good standard. They don't suffer by being built in India at all. So what are your thoughts? Do you think it is depriving people of British jobs, or in the case of Harley Davidson, of American jobs? I know Harley, for the American market, built the street rod and the street in, I think it's Wisconsin or somewhere like that, but they are built in the United States. It might be Kansas, I can't remember. But the fact of the matter remains, if you buy a KTM Duke 390, it is not built in Austria, it is built in India by Bajaj. No one seems to have noticed on that one, and no one seems to mind. The bike's still a cracking piece of kit. And this new smaller Triumph will also be built in India and will be available all over the world. And it isn't purely for the Indian market. So there will be a lot of studies done to make sure quality versus price is right, because like Apple building iPhones in China, there's made in China and there's made in China to other people's specifications, and this will be made in India to other people's specifications. A machine, a moulding machine, die casting machines, things like that, do not care where they are in the world. As long as you feed them electricity, they will produce the same quality of part anywhere in the world. So really your quality control comes down to assembly, and it comes down to the materials used. And if both of those are up to par, which if you're paying someone vast sums of money to do a job like this, they will be, there's no reason why you shouldn't build them in India. Every bit of Triumph, they're every bit what they should be. They'll be developed and designed in-house. Triumph won't just be slapping their name on one by covering up one sticker with another. That's not going to happen. But also it brings out the fact that the face of motorcycling is changing, and some of these new bikes, these 300cc bikes, are very important in the Indian market. That's really the area they're most interested in, 300 to 500cc singles. So I don't know what style of bike this is going to be. It is in response to a Royal Enfield, so I'm guessing it's more of a traditional cruiser, but that style of bike is becoming a huge market, so manufacturers are really going at it guns blazing. So although the bikes are built down to a price, you can bet your bottom dollar they're certainly not going to be rubbish, because it'd just be foolish. And really, markets govern how the motorcycle market looks. I mean, the earliest Japanese bikes that came over here were things like the CB450 Black Bomber, which was a parallel twin, because the Brits, which were obviously was the focus of that market at the time, were building parallel twins. So Japanese built parallel twin. Only when they had enough influence were they able to go their own way. And then of course the British bike market evolved to follow that, and now most bikes built and sold are 3 and 4 cylinder bikes, or 2, 3, 4 cylinder bikes of varying capacities. In the Western world, I'll say the Western world because of course it's Britain, Europe, America, so forth, we prefer bigger bikes. We don't have anyone with a clue here that thinks if they hold back I can get out. They're all too selfish. Every last one of them too selfish. But yeah, so we don't have any real demand, or as much real demand, for smaller bikes, so we don't really develop them so much, and the Indian market has driven the demand for smaller bikes. So are we going to see a slightly changing face of motorcycling in these ever more cost-conscious times? Are we going to see more smaller bikes? Is fuel economy going to become more of a factor? Emissions already have. Emissions are very important. You cannot get away, or you simply are not allowed to build a bike that doesn't meet those regs. But are we going to see more smaller bikes that are useful not only as toys but as tools as well? I mean, these roads here are very typical of the average smaller road in the UK. We've got hundreds of miles of this kind of road, thousands of miles of this kind of road in the UK, and right now we're doing 60 miles an hour, and this is pretty typical. So a bike with 150 mile an hour top speed that's heavy to hustle around really isn't that much use here. People still buy them, but you are a little more restricted. If you're buying a bike to be a weekday commuter and then a weekend toy, 300cc is not the end of the world. In fact, the 500cc is probably about perfect. I never use a fraction of this 600's capability. This is a bike that's 27 years old, and it's already more powerful than it needs to be. So yeah, are we going to see, as petrol in itself tapers out and is on its death throes, are we going to see a bigger push to the slightly smaller bikes that make power where you need them, smaller singles and twins, and are we going to see a change in the face of motorcycling again before the major introduction of electric powered bikes? Tell me what you think, hit the comment section, do share, like and subscribe to these videos, and we'll see you again soon. Don't forget, for moto vlogging and smaller moto vloggers, do go over to www.motovlogalliance.com, or if you're on Discord, search for Motovlog Alliance. There's a whole group of us smaller motor vloggers there producing some really good, interesting material, and we're not really as a whole trying to emulate any of the big moto vloggers. So every single person on that site has their own style and their own way of making vlogs, and really the quality level is just fantastic. So do go and check out those sites and see what the other end of the motovlogging spectrum is doing. So yeah, motovlogging in all of its forms, with always an opinion or all your thought available.